So Mike, officially, thank you for joining me.
Yep.
You're definitely one of the people that inspire me the most that I know right now. Every
Oh
time
man,
we have a conversation, I always walk away thinking, whoa, this guy is thinking on a whole nother level.
dude, I'm trying to keep my head above water. I mostly feel like a total idiot. So there you go. That's the inside story.
Well, for anyone that joins us and anyone that sees this later, like, give us a little introduction. Who are you? What are these things right here?
Yeah, I got some too for here.
Uh,
So
I
these
knew
are called
yours would be way cooler than what I have. I
my,
have a
my
hinge.
I got a really big one back there. I've got like
I
this
see
big
that.
sea slug back there. I had to call my friend Stuart Allerson at Knox College. He's a biology professor. And I said, I made this thing, but I don't know what it is, but I think you might. And he said, yeah, that's actually some kind of sea cucumber. No, it was a hookworm, some kind of worm. So there you go. Yeah, my name is Mike Acerra, and my wife and I founded a company called Lux Blox. We're based in Galesburg, Illinois, and we make educational, like you said in your intro there, we make educational construction toys that are based on nature's principles. When I say principles, it's construction like bricklaying is construction, obviously like Lego, and connects is more like girder beams, 19th century roller coasters and bridges.
Yeah.
We're at this level of construction, the linky level of construction, like the construction that makes crabs and hands, okay, and people and molecules. So our whole thing is about imitating nature, being like a biomimetic or natural construction experience for kids. Something that usually only engineers and architects think about, like buildings in motion. That's where we naturally like to be. Is that in between structure and smoke? You know, that whole in between area.
Whoa. In between structure and smoke.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. Hey, Justin. Hey, Kayla just joined. So, how did this idea arrive? Where did this come from?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? So I'm kind of strange, and I went to Knox College, not because I'm strange, but I went to Knox College and I majored. First, I spent 2 years in aerospace engineering, like your intro said, and because I thought that's what I wanted to do. I grew up in a construction family. My Italian Americans living in Chicago. I grew up on a construction site, so I always had a kind of intuitive feel for why buildings are put together, how they hold their shape, and why they don't. And I went to aerospace. Then I did 2 years at Knox College, or 3 years as an art major. But I left kind of like thinking I didn't feel like I found my tribe. I thought I was an engineer. I wasn't, because math isn't really my big thing. And the art crowd, even though I'm a painter and stuff, I felt like this wasn't my tribe either, using that tribal language. I felt
Yeah.
like my favorite people, like Buckminster Fuller, were largely dead, but they had these like followings. And so I kind of pursued that path, being like an apostle of Fuller. And I read my Thoreau, and he wrote on Walden Pond, of course. And I felt like I needed that experience. I needed to go into nature and get away from, I called it my detox from college. I
Yeah.
wanted to detox from society and just kind of go into the woods and kind of sort things out before I abuse the world of myself. And I wanted to just like kind of like fix and get ready for the world. So it was like kind of the finishing school for me, is go in the forest and figure things out. A lot of book reading. I raised goats, had to chop my own wood and hold my own water, and lived in a cabin called a yurt in this pine forest, and I loved it. And 2 years later, I came out with an idea about where I wanted to go. It gave me a trajectory like a North Star. This is back in 891.
What did you do? What was like there was something in your story, and I've heard it a couple times, that like I would call it like a haunting from your childhood. Like, you saw natural mechanics, and that's the reason I call this like first principles. You saw things in plants and animals that weren't showing up in engineering.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think that if we lose a sense of honesty when we become adults, that we had when we were kids, because we were closer to our source. You know, so everything was raw and wild and like new film, and we just saw everything. And so our experience, we couldn't judge our experiences as kids. All we knew was our experience, right? So kids have a natural wonder, exuberant excitement for like little minnows and
yeah,
frogs and fresh snow and really thin ice on puddles and how cool that is. And just like the things that we geek out over as kids, we abuse ourselves as adults. That just abuse, say, that's nothing to get excited about, kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we ruin ourselves. We're kind of ruined. And so I was really resistant to that because I knew that was a source of poetry and art and innovation. I totally believe that we're closer to God when we're little guppies, and when we get to be adults, we're these monsters that are so distant from inspiration. And so I always try to cultivate a healthy sense of childhood and play and irresponsibility. Thus, I moved to a hut in the woods against my parents and all my friends' advice. Right?
Wait, a healthy dose of irresponsibility. Is that what you just said?
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
If people who overbelieve in the world, I mean the world, small w, the world, like, the word fame comes from the Roman Latin for fama, which means gossip. So, so fame is based on gossip. So when you hear about things and you hear about people and everybody's talking, why do you think you hear about it? Because somebody's paid billions of dollars to get that in front of your face, right? To market it to you. So, but if you believe in that world, you're believing in a world that's largely made up and paid for. You're believing what people want you to believe. And so I've always known I'm lucky because I had a dad who was born in 1919. So I had a very older dad. And so he grew up in the Depression. And it's an advantage to have a really older father because he teaches you, it's like having a grandfather and father rolled into one. I learned so much about history, right? That I had a disbelief of the world. I grew up knowing that John F. Kennedy bought the election in Chicago because my dad's best friend was the mobster who did it for him, right? My next door neighbor was the Guma, the girlfriend of Sam Giancana, the guy who won the election for Kennedy. But I grew up idealizing Kennedy. So I had this Gemini bipolar kind of thing, like, oh, Kennedy's great, but I also know he bought the election. So there was like a realism, a kind of long distance view of the world you get with older parents and grandparents. That if you don't, if kids don't have grandparents in their lives, I think it's sad because they don't have a historical sensibility, I think.
Oh, wow. There's like the ancestry is not being passed down. That's one of the things that I appreciate about the way I grew up. Like some of my most favorite memories are great aunts and uncles sitting around a campfire, telling stories and talking about things that went wrong or went great or whatever. That was, it put structure for me around the world for the first early holding of environment for where I grew up,
It gives you perspective.
It does. That ancestry is very, very powerful. Man, so how did you connect that? Let me come back. What kind of discoveries came out of those moments in the yurt, like that brought you to design Lux?
My wife is trying to make me laugh. She's doing a dance. So it was a long journey, so it took like 20 years after I left the yurt. So it took a long time. It just didn't happen just like that. So your question was, I came out of the woods with a sensibility about how nature worked. Okay.
Yeah.
And that sensibility led to Lux over a course of a bit of time. Okay. But I realized that, when you and I talk about innovation and about Elon Musk and all kind of fun stuff, what Musk is talking about, I didn't know about Elon Musk, of course, back in 1991, but what he's talking about is really old stuff. When he talks about first principles, that goes back to Einstein. That goes way, way, way back. Where in first principles is basically first principles thinking as juxtaposed to thinking by analogy, how everybody else mostly do it. We mostly think by analogy. So if we want to improve something, we look at what's already been done and we tweak it.
Yeah.
That's innovating by analogy. Make the soap a little whiter, make it smell like roses, and put a different label on it. That's an analogous innovation, right? But to do it by true innovation is based on first principles, where you ask questions that seem like you're kind of an idiot. But you're not afraid to make really stupid sounding statements and questions.
Like for example,
do you know how much your house weighs?
No, I don't.
Right. But, and Bucky, that was the question Buckminster Fuller asked people all the time. Bucky Fuller, like, do you realize how much your house weighs? And people are like, why the hell would we? Well, why is that
Yeah.
important?
Yeah.
Because if your car weighed 25 freaking tons and you had to hire 20 people to come to your house to build your car for you, you'd have to be a billionaire to afford a car.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we don't think about cars and houses in the same sentence. But actually, a car is kind of like a house. I've slept in my car. You could have a trailer with plumbing. I mean, why isn't a house? Why an airplane will take you around the world and you have a bathroom on it? You could live on an airplane, right? Or a boat. So, but boat building and airplane technology is leagues, like a century beyond housing. Why is that? Because housing is based on mostly thinking by analogy and tradition and habit. And all the industry has been geared around, like Lowe's and Menards, has been geared around keeping it nice and inefficient and expensive for the homeowner who doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground, right? And they'll have 50 people come to their hole in the ground and build them a house still, because they don't know that technology is such that they don't have to do that anymore. But we haven't geared our system. So that's the kind of thinkers I was interested in, Buckminster Fuller, Elon Musk, people who are like asking those seemingly stupid questions like, why can't cities float in the air? That was Fuller said that. Why can't we have a floating city? Why can't we be air people? That sounds insane, but it's actually physically possible to float a city. So anyways,
well, no, I love it because I think this moment, I was just talking to someone today, this moment in time where we're kind of, a lot of people are pausing, a lot of disruption, right?
Right.
Unprecedented disruption is happening. Yeah. Could be an opportunity. There could be an advantage in this moment to actually ask those kind of questions, like to be able to say, you know, all the things that I think should be this way, or all the things I've always known to be this way. Well, what if I could just lay them all out and ask questions? Because then we discover what we don't know that we don't know, which is when we get into whole new territory.
Right.
Which I think
go ahead. Having a healthy assessment or inventory of what I understand and what I'm pretending to understand. You know, having a good internal bullshit meter. Like, yeah, I'm really playing a tape for you right now at a bar, half drunk, and this is something I really don't even know if that's true. But I say it all the time, so I've grown used to saying it, but I'm really full of crap. And so Fuller literally did that. Fuller refused. He went in, he locked himself in a room and won't come out for like a year, and basically created a language that he was comfortable with about how to describe the world, because he knew that it was all borrowed ideas, and they were too you know, you learn in college, right? Like when you get into an argument with somebody, right? You discipline yourself to not accept their assumptions. And a bad arguer will always try to get you to agree with assumptions you don't agree with, and then lead you down the path to where you're done, right? So if you just say, it sounds rude at first, say, I don't agree with the premise of the question. Like, I don't agree with where you're coming from. And they'll get really frustrated with you. But really, that is discipline. To say, wait, we have to stop right here because you're saying this word. I don't even agree with that word.
Yeah.
I don't agree with when you say America. What are we talking about? Like, you could do that. It's allowed. And that's what Fuller did. That's what Edison did. They said, okay, what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to accomplish?
Well, it's really interesting you bring that up. But like, going back to first principles is even going back to our language. Going back to the fundamental words we use in conversations, and understand that just because someone says something, it doesn't mean that I actually understand the label they're using, because there's probably a lot of information behind that. And to slow down and ask a question about the question, you know, like to say, what do you mean by America? That's really interesting.
I'm sorry I brought that up. I didn't mean to be political. I just gave you a random example.
No, I didn't.
It could be anything. Like,
it could be anything.
What do we mean by large? You know?
Yeah.
Is your large the same as my large? You know? Yeah. Probably not.
Yeah. Well, no. Again, that comes back to the idea of innovation. Like, if we know everything, we can't innovate anything. Right. And if we were willing to risk looking foolish and ask the really obvious questions, we might actually discover something that was just there all along.
Musk's famous question was, why are rocket engines so expensive? And it was just an assumption that rocket engines are impossibly expensive. And he's like, well, they're only made out of metal. How much does metal cost? Right? And that's what he did. He went down to the market value right? So that's interesting. And Fuller did the same thing. Like, how much does a house weigh? What does a house have to be made out of? Does it have to be made out of a forest? Really? In the 21st
Yeah.
century, your house has to be made out of pine trees from Maine? Why?
Yeah.
It seems so stupid. If we think
Yeah.
about what we're doing, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So one of the things you told when I heard you tell your story about the time you spent in the yurt, you spent a lot of time looking at the natural world and how basically things connect and link. Like
Right.
you said earlier,
Right. Mm-hmm.
you're in between what and smoke?
Between structure and smoke. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah. Well, you know, you can't catch nature off guard, right? You just can't do it. Nature never says, "I don't know what to do about that." You kick it, it makes bubbles, right? Nature always has a seemingly elegant solution to whatever kind of violent thing we throw at it. So if we throw an airplane into a building in New York, it turns into this beautiful, horrifying mushroom cloud as it comes down. It's like a flower, like a plant with leaves. It was a beautiful cloud. It's a beautiful thing. It's a horrible thing, but it's like that is really what a building wants to do. We stop it from doing that for a century or so, but eventually we're going to blow it up and it's going to come down. But so buildings are kind of freeze frame on nature. We're trying to freeze it, but that building wants to conform and do this beautiful dance that comes back to the ground again, right? Think about all the things that made it go up in the air, all the different millions of motions that made it go up in the air. Then we lock it into place and it sways in the wind, but it's eventually going to all come back down again. So I see to me, the interesting part of the building is that all the motion, because none of that's chaotic, none of that's random, none of that's like unreasonable. That is actually what, you know, we want to do. A marble statue is not a human being, right? We exist at this level. We're pulsating and vibrating and doing all these motions, and photographs and statues just kind of freeze that. But yeah, that's the place where I was interested as a designer, was like, how do we get kids to play with that? How do we get kids to play with that state? So you have this sheet, right? This little membrane. Our cells are made out of membranes, and they twist and fold a certain way. They'll want to bend. I wanted to put this in kids' hands. I wanted kids to feel the kind of motion that exists at their cell level, but it'll be in their play sphere. They don't have to know about cells and capsids and protein folding, but they can. If you make that part of their play experience, Jesus, then we're breeding a whole new breed of kids. And that's what our job as adults is to give our kids the best chance possible to, you know, have a new world.
Well, I think the thing that's really interesting to me is that, like, engineering wise, like, you could say, here's something really remarkable, and go to the engineering world and apply it to so many different things, right? But you said, no, I want to give this to the most inspired, which probably aren't the engineers, our kids, and I want to start to teach them.
Right. Well, kids don't want to turn something into money. Like, if you apply it to adults, they're going to say, well, how do I turn that into money? Which is nothing wrong with turning something into money. I wish I could do that better than I am. But if you want to have the most impact, it's an old cliche, if you want to have the most impact in society, aim towards kids, or aim towards the unborn. Aim towards the generations that will grow up. No, so you aim low, not high. You aim towards the younger kids. And my wife and I's inspiration for that was Frederick Froebel, who was a student of Pestalozzi and a friend of Maria Montessori. He's the inventor of kindergarten. The fact that 99% of American teachers never heard of Froebel means they don't really know that kindergarten was probably invented by somebody, which is an interesting fact, right?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you know who invented your freaking school? And if you don't know it was invented, you don't know why it was invented. You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know your own traditions. So the most retrograde, uninnovative place in America is probably the American school. Yeah. And no one talks more about innovation than the American schools. They're talking about it all the time, STEM and innovation. But really, and I don't want to be so hypercritical about schools because we all suck. But schools really suck sometimes in ways that you would be surprised about, right? Because they're schools. Yeah. Yeah. So we became really aware of the fact that kindergarten was invented and why, and how amazing these early kindergartens were, and the geniuses that they produced. And these geniuses, actually, like Einstein and Buckminster Fuller and Le Corbusier and Frank Lloyd Wright, they said it was in kindergarten that their minds were blown. That their kindergarten experience gave them a trajectory for their whole life. That's not coming from me. That's coming from them. And we're like, okay, so what was he doing back in 1840? And he was basically, he was a scientist who studied geology. He was a geologist. He studied crystals, not California New Age crystals, but like, you know, like cobalt and all the crystals that make the minerals, right? And he based toys based on those angles and shapes and patterns and motions, okay? And he exposed these little kids in the 19th century to twirling prisms, pyramids. When you twirl a pyramid, it makes a cone. It blurs into a cone, right? So he showed the beautiful thing of that's calculus, where you keep taking sides away from a cone to approximate a perfect sides away from a pyramid, like a facets, like a jeweler would do, until it's almost smooth and it approximates a perfect cone. Same with a polygon, like a gem. You keep cutting facets up to approximate a perfect sphere, but a sphere is unreal. A sphere is an imagined and infinite, right, faceted thing. So he's exposing little kids to these ideas. And he was the Bauhaus in Germany, the great art school, the Bauhaus. Its founders credited Freudian kindergartens on their inspiration. So we're like, well, how do we make a kindergarten toy for the 21st century? And that got my wife and I on our trajectory to make the company. We said we have to use first principles to make a new construction block that's the most based on nature we can, and that's what we did.
You know, the first time that I was introduced to this and what you're up to. Like I will admit I got like goosebumps because I thought to myself, like, what are the things if a kid grows up understanding this and learning some of this in between structure and smoke,
right?
What are the things will they bring into the world?
Okay, here's the great frontier. You know, it's not as much like Star Trek. You know, like going out. What did Kirk say? To go boldly go where no man has gone before, out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's really, we're going in. And now we're talking about folding proteins, right? Mm-hmm. That when you get down to the really nitty gritty, tiny aspect of like the capsid layers on like the coronavirus, these are all things like this. They're folding polypeptides that are folding into beta sheets, beta strands into beta sheets and the beta proteins. And it's as structural and intuitive as putting together a lawnmower or waving a sheet over your bed. It's all nature doesn't have a time where it says, okay, we're not structural anymore, except maybe at the quantum level. But almost all of experience is the same structural problems going on. But we limit it to our sphere, our heads above our plane of existence, right? But now that with the visualization software we have and kids that could look at like what proteins are doing, kids are being asked, can you solve this problem? It's a 4D, like a moving 3-dimensional problem. I call it 4-dimensional problem. So kids will be more adept at the 4th dimension than we were. We weren't really aware of it. So that's where we're going. We're developing different parts of these kids' cortexes where they're going to be able to become. It's like the geometry of, if you imagine a circle of girls all facing inward on the circle, right? Mm-hmm. They're all facing inward, right? They're all facing each other in the circle, all these little gymnasts. And at the same time, they all do a backflip at the same exact time. That's like how I like to think about it. That thing they just made is kind of like smoke. That's kind of like when you make an explosion, that mushroom cloud goes up and that donut-shaped torus of smoke goes up. That's the motion of 10 or 100 little girls all facing each other doing a backflip at the same time. That is the kind of coordinated visual thinking I want kids to have.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. I mean, that's nature.
Yeah, like the answers have just always been around us, but we've just walked right past them.
It's always been that way.
So how does an adult, like these, the stuff that you're bringing into the play space and the learning space for kids is going to be really helpful for them, but how does an adult like stay connected to that childlike wonder and kind of curiosity of those kind of obvious questions when we've abandoned it?
Right. Well, one thing helps is to get out of the reptile part. We talked about the reptile part of the brain. If you're in a panic mode, forget it. The hierarchy of who was the psychologist? The hierarchy of the pyramid. Maslow. Is it Maslow? think it's Maslow.
Yeah, it sounds right.
Yeah, the need. So if you're in panic mode, yeah, then get your kids in a boat and get the hell out of the country. I mean, that's where you're at. You have to get the heck out because they're going to kill you, right? So you're not going to be thinking about, you know, backward flipping girls making mushroom clouds. That's not where you're going to be at, but that's okay. We have legs to run too, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as we settle down and we can figure out a way to give ourselves some time during the day or during the week to allow us, like Bill Gates still does. He reads and he ponders. But you don't have to be a billionaire to do that. But you have to figure out some kind of lifestyle where you give yourself a little bit of time every day to ponder. I don't think most people can do that. I think people are on their phone now. It's wasting so much time. So I think now we have more time, free time now than we probably in a history of humanity. And I mean, like middle class people and lower middle class people with very little income still have free time, more than we've ever had. We're not operating in mostly desperation mode like we used to as a people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of on us. And it's as simple as asking, don't be afraid to ask stupid sounding questions. Like, how big is big? What's really outside? What is outside? You know, whatever the question is, you know, what's a baby? What the hell is it? I had two kids. I still don't know what a baby is. They're crazy creatures, right? You know, and how are you supposed to be a good parent? I've been a parent. I'm still not sure. So it's okay to ask those kind of questions that everyone thinks to be cool and with it, you should be in woke. You should know the answer to these questions. Really?
Well, I mean, that as an adult, that is, we're creatures of our ego in a lot of ways, right?
Right.
Like I have the answers.
Right.
Something I started doing about a year ago that's been really helpful for me is I have a thing that goes off at 10 and 2, and I rarely miss practicing it, and it just says wonder. So I stop and I look at whatever's around me and I ask questions about it. Like, how does it work? Where did it come from? You know, like, and then I'll take notes about it because I don't want to waste that moment. Like there was something that came up there that I might need to go back and access. And in real life, that shows up in a planning meeting or a design meeting or some sort of scripting meeting. All of a sudden, an idea pops in my brain that I've already kind of done some work around. And it's not that I don't have to pull it out of thin air. Like, example, the other day I saw all these pigeons flying around my building downtown, and I thought, are pigeons only in urban areas? Are they out in the country? Like, I grew up in the country. I don't remember ever seeing pigeons. Why is that? You know, where do they go? Like, if there were no cities, where would all the pigeons go? Right? Like, again, not a normal kind of question, but I took notes about it and made me really think about, like, you know, what attracts them to these city centers.
Right.
I don't know the answers.
But the important thing about what you said for me is that you're getting down to process, and the process is you're playing what I call the long game.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're designed for the long game, for letter writing, right? For not seeing each other for months on end, for pondering, for looking out into. But our culture is. I was gonna pull up the phone here, but our culture is all about the short game now. Short, right? And our brain wasn't really designed for just short-term things. So if you're going to write a symphony or make a mural at church or do anything big, that's long game stuff. And if you're going to innovate, that, like you're getting to, that's putting in your 10,000 hours incrementally over a long period of time to make yourself go back and ponder that thing and ponder that thing. And people like physicists like Richard Feynman, he's famous for talking about process. If people are interested in how great thinkers think, Richard Feynman, the physicist, is one of the greatest teachers America ever made. He's one of our greatest teachers. Not just a physicist, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, but his lectures on YouTube are famous now. They're now on YouTube for free. And he wrote many funny books. He was a jokester. He moved to Brazil and he played an instrument in those Brazilian bands, you know. He was hilarious, but he worked in the Los Alamos Project. So reading about people who inspire you is really important, but the long game is important. And following your own intuitions, that little baby that's still inside of you that's excited about minnows, for instance, right? Or little wet black snails. If you still find yourself really loving little wet black snails, then dude, go to a pond, stick your arm in there and ponder snails. Ponder the things, because you didn't come up with that. See, CNN and Fox News and Joe Rogan, none of those guys programmed in you a love for little black snails. that came from some other source, man. That's getting down into the default settings of your mind and your existence. That's where you need to go. Like you were saying, you're fasting by pigeons. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I hear that. It's like a lot of people get stuck at this time in life where they feel like they left something behind. Somewhere along the way, they set it down, and they really didn't set it down. They just kind of closed it down. It's
Right.
still there.
Right.
It's going back to those things as a child and kind of rediscovering. You love to dance. Well, what's there? Like, what can you learn from that?
Right. How are you in your own way? How are you in your own way of, because that's what it is, really. You're in your own way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love this idea too. I think we might have talked about this last week, that genius is not like, it's not a person. Even in antiquity, they would describe it as like it comes and visits you.
Right.
It come and rest on you in moments. And to think that we're really all have the potential of genius just sitting right there.
Yeah.
And most of us are playing the short game of like, well, what's on my Twitter feed right now, right? And instead of that pondering, that sitting in the moment and discovering, like you going and living in a yurt for 2 years, you know, I don't know, would you have discovered what you discovered?
No, probably not. Because I know what a scatterbrained ADHD idiot I am, and I probably would have got sucked into a lot of things. But I think a lot of geniuses had a similar thing. They talk about how it was an act not of them saying, look what I know, right? But look what I listened to. Look what came to me, and I diligently wrote it down, but I have no idea where the hell who's talking to me right now. Poets, music songwriters say the words just come. They come out of the blue when I least expect it. When Einstein wanted to come up with really great ideas, he concentrated on playing the violin because he knew if he did the obvious thing, I should really think smart thoughts right now, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
He had to open himself up, take out the antennas and let them like stretch themselves. So, and
that's like a muscle too. That doesn't just like, you don't just wake up and like you could flip it on, of course, and then not flip it on the next day and think you broke it. You know, it's a muscle. Like you have to work at it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a long, long, long game. Lux was a long game for us just because I'm not clever enough to have done it in a hurry. It took a long time to figure out how to make the hinge, right? How to figure out the problem. And the trick, we talk, in business, people talk about finding a problem or a pain point in society. People want it, and that people want it fixed, right? You find your customer, you find their problem, and you try to solve it. We're trying to solve a problem that no one knew existed, that I didn't even know existed. It was a cultural habit we had, right? That was slowing down progress. But no, and one of the reasons why it was so pernicious was people didn't even know it was there. They didn't know it was a problem, right? So if you have all your food you need in your culture, right? If you have all the food, all the nice things you need, do you think your culture will progress very quickly?
No.
Right. So the minute people found out that people across the way and over the hill and dale and over the ocean had really cool stuff, they're like, well, I want that stuff. Everything else now looked a little cheaper. They wanted the shiny beads from across the ocean. Well, why are they so expensive? Like, have you ever tried to get in a boat? What's a boat? Right?
Yeah.
So the technology I always talk about the history of history because the technology always spikes when you want more, and you have to go somewhere to get it. And going over oceans was such a difficult technological feat that our society just exponentially grew. The mathematics of navigation, the engineering of making a clock that can stay accurate in the ocean for months on end, because the only way you can navigate longitude was to know the time.
Yeah.
Right. And the only way to know it, and you had to set it at Greenwich time, and they had to keep Greenwich time. If you lost Greenwich time on your boat, you're probably going to run into rocks because you just lost your longitude. And it was and so it was so deadly so technology had to grow, and the money was there. You had to get that spice from the Spice Islands to Boston. And so that history is so fascinating. but we're still largely a land-loving society. We're mostly
Do you
idiots.
do you think do you think we're in that moment again? Like
Yeah.
this coronavirus moment could actually provide an opportunity for us to have to ask those kind of questions.
Well, yeah, what scares me is that when we become decadent and we don't seem to have it, we've lost our way. That's what's, because I know innovation is going to go willy-nilly, and people are like, oh, it's really neat that they came up with this shiny new thing. But like the Musks of the world are interesting because he knew that going to the moon, the Kennedy's thing of let's go to the moon in a decade, right? Musk knew that what that did was that kind of detonated this explosion of innovation that had to happen. So many inventions had to be made. So many managerial innovations had to be done to get all of these people to come together to make a rocket go to the moon, land in there, and bring them back. You know, almost impossible. And Musk knows that when you try to do these really big things, it puts the right kind of pressure on to get the innovation done. And he knows that the hiatus we took from space, doing low Earth orbit for 20 or 30 years with the space shuttle, kind of brought innovation down a bit because the goals were so low, they really were, that it was all possible. The technology mostly had been done, and but getting to Mars is really, really hard. So I think that we should set big goals for our kids. Like, help us get to Mars. Kids are born heroes. That's why they always want to go to see Marvel movies. But we're like, oh, kids are such little comic book idiots. No, they're not. They actually want to be heroes, dude, and you're wasting that opportunity. Because if you tell them, please help us step up, they will step up.
It's interesting you say that, because like my daughter Bella, who's 6, we always have the conversation around, she's really into space right now, like what planet she's going to live on. Like, what planet do you want to live on? Like, or which one do you want to discover or be the first one there? Like,
isn't that great?
Yeah, and I understand that may be sound a little crazy, but I mean, I wish someone would have said that to me when I was a kid. Like, what planet do you want to live on? You know, because I heard a whole lot of that's impossible, you know. But I obviously ignored it, ignored a lot of that conversation because I didn't enjoy that. I like a good problem. I said it last week in another call. Like, I don't know that I've met a problem I didn't like. Like, it's a puzzle.
Right.
I'd like to take a puzzle and find out where its weaknesses are and how to fix it and how to solve it, you know, and I got in trouble because I was the kid that Dad came home from work and the lawnmower was in 200 pieces and lined up perfectly. You know, I spent all of my allowance at the hardware store.
Isn't that fun to do though?
Yeah.
I took them apart, but I couldn't put them back together. But I love taking them apart.
Yeah, I had a couple successes and a lot of failures in the process. Right. But so where does Lux go in this moment? Like, how do you get these in this moment? What are you guys doing to get these? You know, now that we don't know what's going to happen, right?
We have one of the things we did was we kind of created a tribe. We found our tribe, and it took a couple of years to do that. And a lot of it's in Europe, believe it or not. In Finland and Hungary, yeah. And some UNESCO teachers are doing this UNESCO conference because all the teachers are pretty much, staying in place too over there. And they're having this conference, and they asked Lux to help them make a COVID-19 inspired lesson, right? Which is funny because I just talked to some American teachers, and they're like, I was in a podcast, and they said, we're going to cut out the part about when you talked about building viruses because it's scary. And I was like, are you crazy? This is what they call the freaking teachable moment. Yeah. And it's like, so the Europeans have more imagination than we do. I just think they do. And so American teachers tend to buy the shiny new thing that's going to fix their problem. And I think the Europeans just don't seem to be that way. I don't know what it is, but they like, maybe because they've come from an older, long distance kind of culture. They live in history as opposed to us. We kind of always go for the new. And I don't mean hypercritical of America, but that's kind of what it is. So, but anyway, so we had over here, we said, okay, we'll do a thing on COVID viruses. But we went down to and we studied polypeptides and how they fold. And, so we're always innovating and trying to become relevant to, like we were talking about, this 4-dimensional thinking. It's really hard right now. When we came into the business, all around us, the giants were falling. Connects went bankrupt, and Toys R Us went bankrupt, and all these big toy construction giants were falling down. And we said, let's not aim at the toy space, because that's a crazy space. We don't understand it. That's not where we come from. So we aimed at the ed space, and so teachers really are our tribe. I was a teacher, and so we're slowly getting there. We have a steady increase of about 70% a year in sales. And so it's kind of slow growth right now, but we're working at it. It's hard. It's hard, but you got to find the hero in people and say, you know what? Actually, progressivism was right, that kids should be seen as these little potential geniuses. And we shouldn't just try to pump into their minds all the crap we know, even though we know we're kind of full of crap. It's weird. You know, like, let the kids, little connection making machines, do their job.
Yeah.
Because do people forget that they hated school? I mean, most people, if they're honest, will tell you they pretty much hated school. It's prison, right? So when are kids excited? Give them a shovel and have them make a ditch that makes water go from the creek to a little pond they made, right? They love digging.
Yeah.
Give them an axe and let them chop down some crappy trees that are ruining the garden. Those are great. We always had youth programs, and kids, if you say cut some saplings down, let's build a tower, they will go freaking crazy. And what you've just done is you've connected them to humanity. You've connected them to our cultural past, right? So it's like the fetus. Remember when we studied the fetus, and it goes back and starts with a little amoeba or the little split cells, and then we turn like into little proto-lizards, and then we turn into a chicken, and then a gopher, and then a monkey, and we kind of go up the phylum. We kind of grow into these people, right? We're like 99% not uniquely human. We're like 99% mouse. We're like 91% worm. Like, we're mostly the other creatures, right? So my point is this: why do we deny kids death? Like, why do we try to sanitize life and keep death away from them, and keep animals away from them, and nature, and cutting trees down and building stuff? We should really be exposing kids to what we went through as a culture. Have them lay some bricks. Have them dig a ditch. Kids actually embrace this kind of stuff. And I sound crazy, right? Like, why are you talking that way? It's true. I mean, if you think about what kids dig, it doesn't take much to entertain a child. Give them the adult tools, and they're happy.
No, I posted this last week after our conversation. I think it was the same day we had a talk. Mm-hmm. We were just chatting, and I went outside, and it was a really windy day, and I had given my son, who's 9, a piece of like plastic visqueen, like, I don't know, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, that was just in the garage. And like, It was pretty windy. I mean, He played 2 days in a row, probably put 8 hours into that thing. And we were talking about, like, thermodynamics and the heat. And I mean, there's science happening, right? Like, he was trying to understand what made it, stay aloft, and what happened when we wrapped it around us, and how warm we got. Like, why was that happening? How was the heat being trapped, right? It's all right there. And I think the other thing that's unique about kids is their curiosity is vulnerable, and they're not afraid of that. Like, hey, Susie, come over and check out what I'm doing, right? Like, they're not like, hey, this is my private thing over here. I mean, a little bit, and it's usually with things that they feel like they have ownership over. But if they're innovating, they want to share it, and they want to invite people into that conversation.
They're like real scientists. They want peer review. They want to they want to share their knowledge. Absolutely. My dream youth program would be, I'd be like Captain Spaulding, like Groucho Marx, and I'd have a pith helmet on, and I have these kids. And I have these kids in these boats, and we go on real freaking expeditions with fly nets. You know what I mean? And little jars, and we go to a lake, and find specimens. We need to show the world what exists, right? And then we're digging around for worms and little and like naturalists used to do. Like, that was really cool stuff. Discovering the world and bringing it back to humanity, and saying, look at all the different aphids we found, and all the different whatever larvae we found. Kids would eat that right up, right? But we don't.
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah.
They don't get their hands dirty like they should.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so powerful. And I love how, like, it all plays into really solving big problems. Like, we have problems that we've given up on because we say, oh, they're unsolvable, but the solutions right in front of us. We just stop playing. You know,
It's
getting our
funny
hands
how,
dirty.
yeah, we have this myopia in every generation that we're smarter than the generation before us. They were idiots, you know, and that where is there out left to go? Like we're the top of the heap. When in fact we know we have good evidence to show that we're not as literate as we used to be. We don't handwrite anymore. You can say, well, what's the use of handwriting? We'll be ethereal little virtual creatures pretty soon. But we're getting dumber in some ways. You know, even though we're getting richer and life's getting easier for most people, we're not really applying it as much. And I'm not a negative person. I'm a really positive person.
Yeah, I know that.
Just think it's more like missed opportunities. We have these great opportunities now, more than ever before. And are we going to waste them? Right? American schools are mostly preoccupied with one thing on the whole, and that's winning sports teams. Still there. We're still there. And that's kind of the model for all at the college level. That's kind of like our culture, I think.
Well, it's interesting. Seth Godin talks about how, you know, we do a lot of work around teaching kids how to collect dots, right? Like A on this test, A on this test, instead of teaching them how to connect dots and solve problems.
Right.
You know, and allowing for failure. I think about this a lot. Like as adults, how committed we are to being right. We're so committed to being right about everything that we can't see any other possibility. Where did that come from?
Right.
We were taught that to get an achievement, a reward, or a pat on the back, that you have to, you know, win this test, win this test, you know, complete this test at 100%. I mean, where at in school do we talk about room for failure, right?
Yes, smart people know stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of school. Yeah, and the kids that want to burn things and break things and aren't afraid to make mistakes, and there isn't as much a place for them, right?
Well, it doesn't fit. Like we have like our 3-year-old right now, he's unlike all the rest of our kids. He really loves tearing things apart.
Yeah.
Like so much so that every other kid in the house doesn't want him in their room because nothing is sacred to him. Nothing is sacred to him. Yeah. But you know what you just said, I mean, that calls me on something, because like I can become critical of that, and to the point where like I see the pain that it inflicts, but in his mind, he's just solving some problems, or he's trying to figure out how things work.
Yeah,
the mechanics
you
of it.
give him his own space pretty much so he can break stuff. Isn't that a new thing now? People are breaking things as a party, like they're having break parties. That's a thing now, isn't it?
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be. Mike.
Yeah,
man. Thanks for sharing your brain with us for a few
Absolutely.
minutes.
This was a blast. I like doing it.
Where can besides obviously your Instagram right here, where would people go to find out more about Lux Blox?
Yeah, Instagram's a good place to see like our we have like almost 1,000 pictures and videos, but our website's luxblox.com. That's our website, and you'll learn a lot there. And Facebook, but yeah, you can get us on Amazon too.
If you're a teacher or an administrator, and like these resources sound interesting, or you know, you just think, hey, this would be a great conversation to bring into our company or our team, like to talk about first principles, to talk about, you know, going back and asking really, really dumb questions, which are really the smart questions. Like how can people connect with you to find out more about bringing this into education space?
They can just email me at mike@luxbox.com. The design challenges are like our hottest thing now. We just did one at Bradley University with the engineering students and the game design students. And we just said Mars is in trouble. We need to come up with technology using the Lux to make the colony successful. And that was the challenge. It was pretty open-ended. And they were competitive in like the best way. They were in teams. They were looking over their shoulder like what the other kids were doing. And they made some of the coolest stuff. They blew my mind. They made things I'd never imagined. And it's not just college kids that do that, though. I do these challenges with junior high and high school kids too, or what I'll say, fix Mars or make a bridge or make a technology, you know. And they love to be like the hero who's going to come in and have a great idea and like show it off. I mean, if the ego is involved, it's a good application of the ego. So
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to administrators about this, because what we say is Lux will bring into your school a level of excitement, okay? It kind of takes that chaos to the school. A lot of times Lux is used for remediation. In Galesburg, the superintendent, when you walk in the superintendent of schools' offices, right? It's a beautiful building. You walk in, on the main table when you walk in, it's a cocktail table. It's a big bowl of Lux. That's the first thing you see. He uses that when he has remediations for like expulsions and to bring the tension down. And usually it's a kid that likes to break things, right? And he'll say to the kid who's in trouble, his parents are there, whatever, I bet you I could build a better drag racer than you can, better dragster than you can. He gives this kid, it never fails. The tension goes down, the kid takes the challenge, and him and the superintendent are building the car as fast as they can, right?
Love it.
That's a beautiful thing. How do you make a curriculum around that? But that's the kind of stuff that happens with Lux in a school, because it brings a level of excitement that's really constructive. And it's a conversation starter for things like polypeptides, space colonization, cool conversations. So yeah, that's to answer your question, I think.
No, it totally does. And I think it gives even more context for how this can be applied in a way that opens up opportunities for discovery.
Right. Well said.
Yeah. Hey,
thanks, Nick.
I'll talk to you soon. Thanks,
Okay.
my friend.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye.